Hello students, I am Sharnapurni from Learned Education, and today I am going to take you through the second part of the Transpiration chapter as per class 10 ICSE reduced syllabus that was published in the month of November. So we studied about transpiration in our previous class where we spoke very elaborately on the phenomenon and on various experiments we studied which explain this process of transpiration. And today we are going to talk some more about this process which is absolutely essential to plants, and how is it essential, that we are going to learn today. And also we are going to talk about certain other processes like guttation and bleeding. Yes students, plants also do bleed. When do they bleed? We are going to study. So for that you need to follow my slides now. What is, first of all, the definition of transpiration? Transpiration is the loss of water. There is a off missing. The loss of water in the form of vapor from aerial parts of the plant, which is known as transpiration, right? Any child will also be able to tell you that. Now what are the three processes or the three types of transpiration? The thing which we spoke about in our previous class was stomatal transpiration, which is occurring through the stomatal pores. Remember the stomatal pores which were flanked by two guard cells on the two sides, and the turgidity of the guard cells, the turgor pressure inside the guard cell which would open the stomata, and the water vapors will go out of the plant, right, in the form of diffusion. Next kind of transpiration is cuticular transpiration. Cuticle is basically a waxy covering on the surface of some leaves, and also of green stems, herbaceous stems. So transpiration through this cuticle is known as cuticular transpiration. And also there are lenticular transpirations from happening through lenticels of woody stems. So lenticels are certain openings that are found on the woody stems or on the branches of the old trees, and through that when transpiration takes place, that is known as lenticular transpiration. Moving on, first of all, the importance of transpiration. Now how the plant is getting benefited. The first point is cooling effect. So as the water vapor is getting evaporated from the plant surface, what is happening? The plant surface is getting cooled as a result, okay? So that produces a cooling effect on the surface of the leaves. On the surface of the leaves of the plants, this is an F, surface of leaves of the plants. Next is a very important effect of transpiration is development of suction force. This you have learnt in your absorption chapter, is that how transpiration causes a suction force in the entire plant so that water can be pulled up in a single column through the tall trees. So it causes development of suction force which causes the ascent of sap. That means the transfer of the conduction of water through the xylem vessels up into the tree. So that is the suction force. So how is it created? So as water is getting evaporated through the stomatal pores, right, in this process, there is a pull, that is a pull of water through the xylem vessels against the force of gravity. This is against gravity, and this is how water is being pulled to great heights in the trees, right. Next is distribution of water and salts throughout the plant body. So as transpiration is continuously taking place, water and minerals are getting conducted in a continuous stream. There is no break in that column of water throughout the plant body. So translocation and the transport of water is happening through the process of transpiration. Then removal of excess of water from the plant. So we know that whatever a plant absorbs from the soil, about 95 to 98% of that water gets transpired from the plant, and only 2 to 5% of that water the plant actually uses to photosynthesize and for other purposes, right. So, this much, so whenever there is an excess absorption of water by the roots, that excess water gets transpired in the form of, in the process of transpiration. These are the importance. Now, we talk about the disadvantages of transpiration. Now, excessive transpiration can cause a process known as wilting. So, excess transpiration can cause wilting of the leaves, okay. In a hot day, when transpiration exceeds the absorption of water from the soil, then wilting happens. Also, if transpiration is in excess, then it may cause stunted growth of the plants. Stunted growth of plants is a negative effect of transpiration, and also expenditure of energy. So, you see that around all this % of water is getting transpired. So, the plant needs water for photosynthesis and for other purposes also. So, for that it absorbs more and more water, and more water gets transpired. So, in this process a lot of energy is getting used by the plant for this purpose. So, excessive transpiration will actually cause the plant to absorb more water and resulting in expending more energy in this process. In the third slide, we come across the factors which are affecting transpiration. So, you know, this is a biological phenomenon. So, in these kinds of phenomenon, always there are some external environmental factors which can enhance or diminish the rate of transpiration. The first such factor, and perhaps the most important factor, is light. Okay, let me use this pen now, black pen. So, light is the most important factor in the affecting the rate of transpiration. So, whenever there is excess sunlight, or sunlight will always bring about transpiration. Sunlight, in the direct sunlight or in the form of diffuse sunlight, will always bring about transpiration. One, it will increase the temperature, the surrounding temperature. So, what will happen? Water can be easily evaporated or easily diffused out through the stomatal pores. Another thing that light will bring about is the opening of the stomatal pores. You know that the stomatal pores are opened in sunlight and they are closed at night. So, sunlight will definitely increase the rate of transpiration. When there is no light, stomatal pores will be closed and transpiration will minimize. Next is humidity. So, if there is low humidity, if the humidity is low, that means the atmosphere is not laden with water vapor and moisture. The atmosphere is dry, condition is there in the environment. If the environment is dry, then more water will ooze out of the cells, will go through the stomatal pores, will go out of the stomatal pores. So, low humidity means high transpiration. Transpiration is high, okay, in case of low humidity. And if conversely, if the atmosphere is filled up with water vapor, is laden with moisture, that means if H is very high, then transpiration will automatically be low. Why transpiration will be low? Because then the area which is just outside the stomatal pore will be laden with water vapor, and more water vapor cannot come out of the stomatal pore as a result. So, transpiration will minimize. Then comes temperature. This is also, you can understand yourself, children, that temperature will definitely increase the rate of transpiration. So, if surrounding atmosphere is hot, then it will be easy for the water vapor to come out of the stomatal pore, but this also has to be kept in mind that very high or very low temperature will cause the stomatal pores to close. So, though high temperature will aid in transpiration, will increase the rate, but very high and very low temperature will close the stomatal pore. Then comes wind velocity, means speed of the wind. Speed of wind, if it is high, then what will happen? The vapors which are coming out of the stomata will be readily removed from the surface of the leaves because the wind velocity is high. So, transpiration will increase in that case. And conversely, if the wind velocity is not there, it is quite still, the plants are not, there is no rustling of leaves, then that process will not happen. So, if there is a decrease in wind velocity, I am writing V for velocity, if it is less, then transpiration as a result will also diminish. Next comes the concentration of carbon dioxide. So, if the concentration of carbon dioxide is more than normal, it is more than the 0.03% of concentration of CO2, then transpiration will be less. Rate of transpiration will diminish. So, you see how all of these factors are influencing transpiration. So, any of the factors can be taken up by the board examiners or by your school teachers, and they can ask you that how does wind velocity affect the rate of transpiration? How does humidity affect the rate of transpiration? So, the words and the phenomenon, resulting phenomenon must be very clear to you. Low humidity, transpiration will be high. Why? Because the air is not laden with moisture, but if the air is laden with moisture and water vapor, transpiration will be low. There are some other factors we will quickly do. Availability of soil water. If there is the soil water availability is less, or the absorption process, absorption of water by the roots, I am writing H2O, absorption is lagging, then what will happen? Transpiration will also diminish, because if transpiration does not diminish, then the plant will suffer, the plant will wilt, and permanent wilting of the plant will cause death of the plant. So, transpiration will come down if the absorption of water is slow or it does not take place. In case of atmospheric pressure, if the atmospheric pressure is low, then transpiration will happen. Okay. So, low atmospheric pressure will result in higher transpiration, and vice versa. If the pressure is high, then transpiration will be low. And lastly, fog. If the outside air is all foggy, and that means moisture is there, so transpiration will be low. If high fog is there, then T will come down. The transpiration rate will diminish. So, these are the factors, physical factors which are influencing the rate of transpiration. Now, we come to types of transpiration. What are the types? There are several types we have studied. We were just studying stomatal transpiration, which we have studied in detail in our previous class. Now, if you are finding it difficult to understand this class because this is a continuation of the previous one, you need to go back to our page and you can check out the videos. You can share and subscribe the videos. If you subscribe to the channel, then obviously you will be notified the next time I upload. So, types of transpiration, first is the cuticular one, which is loss of water vapor through the cuticular surface. Now, I can show you a picture. This is the cuticle. Let me use a different, go back to my blue pen again. This is the cuticle. What is cuticle? A waxy covering on the surface of the leaves. This is X, waxy covering on the surface of the leaves, okay, which will stop or reduce excessive loss of water, right? And if the cuticle is very thick, then loss of water will not take place. But if the cuticle is thin and normal, moderate, then water can evaporate out, and that is known as cuticular transpiration. Loss of water vapor through the cuticular surface is cuticular transpiration, What is cuticle? It is a wax-like covering on the epidermis of leaves and also of herbaceous green stems. And how much cuticular transpiration does occur? If you consider the whole of transpiration, in that only 10% of it happens through the cuticle. Then we come to the second type is the lenticular one. Loss of water through the lenticels. These are holes, these openings on the woody stems of plants. I have written this point in the next one. Lenticels are special openings in the woody stems of old trees or in the branches of the old trees you can find. In this slide you can see these are the openings, these are the lenticels, part of a stem showing the lenticels. Through this water gets continuously outside. So, there is no closing or opening of the lenticular openings as we can see in stomata. So, lenticular transpiration occurs day and night. Unlike stomata which is closed at night, lenticels are always open. And what is if you compare these two, through lenticels transpiration amount is much higher than the cuticular one, but it is much less than the stomatal transpiration. So, stomata is the main organ through which this transpiration process takes place. So, this slide where I have explained the cuticle waxy covering and the lenticels, let us move on to the next one, which talks about the wilting of leaves during a hot day and antitransparency. So, what is wilting? We had just now studied as the temperature goes higher up, or if you consider the noon time, afternoon when the temperature is the highest, during that time what happens, the sun is blazing and this will cause the water vapors to diffuse out of the plant. Evaporation will take place in maximum. And if the rate of this transpiration is more than the rate of absorption of water by the roots, then the leaves of the plants will wilt. If you can see the picture carefully, these are drooping leaves, okay. So, the leaves are all facing downwards, the leaves have drooped, the plant is looking quite dry. So, this is what is wilting of leaves. Now, this is not a continuous or permanent thing. So, in the afternoon when the temperature is very high, wilting takes place, and again in the evening the plants, they are reformed, they go back to their original stature. So, this in the evening time, in evening again the plants go back to their original form, okay. But in the noon time, because of the hot sun, the leaves of the plant can wilt. Now, this transpiration is a continuous process. Now, what happens in drier weather, in drier climates, you cannot let the plant go through transpiration all the time. And if this continues, then the plants will permanently wilt and then they will die. So, in order to reduce that, we have some antitranspirants which are chemicals used to reduce, mark the word reduce, the rate of transpiration. They prevent the stomatal opening, so they can be sprayed on the plants like chemicals like phenyl mercuric acid, which is PMA. In the exam they can give you this as PMA, they may not mention phenyl mercuric acid, or abscisic acid. It is a form of plant growth regulator or a hormone which is artificially sprayed on the plant as an antitransparent to reduce the rate of transpiration. What do? They prevent stomatal opening. There can be other antitransparents like silicone emulsions which form a kind of a layer over the trees, over the leaves, so that transpiration does not take place. So, all these can be applied artificially or synthetically over the plant to reduce the harmful effects of transpiration. Okay, so now we come to this slide. If you are liking my presentations, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let us see through this. This is adaptations in plant to reduce transpiration. Now, as humans, of course, we need to grow crops, we need our own system, we have to cultivate and everything. So, for that we are applying antitransparent synthetically. Now certain plants in drier environment, the plants which grow, so they also have certain structural modifications done to reduce the process of transpiration. Structural modifications. What are these structural modifications? One is sunken stomata. Sunken stomata, as in the plant called nerium, you can see in the next slide. In this slide, this is the sunken stomata. Okay, or you see the opening is so narrowed in this case. This is the sunken stomata in the leaves of nerium plants. The plants which grow in xerophytic or dry conditions, they have these kinds of stomata with lot of hair. Can you see the hair? Can you make out the hair? These are the hairs. So sunken stomata and presence of hair in the stoma will reduce the rate of transpiration in these plants. Next one is thick cuticle. I had already told you that if the cuticle is very thick, the waxy covering is thick, cuticle is actually impervious to water. It does not let the water come in contact with that leaf surface. So if on the epidermis, if the cuticle is very thick, it will be impervious to water, and hence transpiration will not take place. Fewer stomata. If the stomata is reduced, stomata numbers are reduced, then obviously transpiration will be low. T will come low. Loss or modification of leaves as in cacti. So in certain plants what happens? The leaves are shed, or there are less number of leaves, leaves are lost, or the leaves are modified into spines, as you might have noticed in cactus plants, spines or thorns, which will reduce transpiration. Narrow leaves or rolling up of leaves. In the leaves of nerium, what happens? The leaves are quite narrowed because to reduce the rate, to reduce the phenomenon of transpiration, or many leaves can roll up also in hot days in the afternoons, so that transpiration does not take place or is rather minimized. And lastly, needle-like leaves, as in pinus, you know these are in those hilly regions, the leaves of these trees are quite narrowed, they are needle-like. So these are the structural modifications or adaptations that a plant does to reduce the effect of transpiration. Sunken stomata is a very important point that you have to remember. You have to remember the name of the leaf, which is nerium, Nerium, or in pine leaf also you can see a sunken stoma with hairs to reduce transpiration. So always keep revising. So we have spoken about transpiration, we have spoken about the phenomenon. In the previous presentation we have spoken about the experiments which actually prove that transpiration is taking place. Transpiration is taking place more through the lower epidermis of a dorsiventral leaf, right? Now we study about two other phenomena of plants. One is guttation, another one is bleeding. So what happens? How is it different from transpiration? We will learn that. First, guttation as a whole, what is this phenomenon? So if you take up a plant, any herbaceous plant you take on a very moisture filled day, on a rainy day when the soil is full of moisture, from that kind of soil, if you take up a plant, if you cut the stem of the plant, you can see that water oozes out of the plant. Or if you look very closely in the, not very closely also, if you look closely in the leaves of the plants in the morning time, you can see that in the edges of these leaves, tiny droplets of water are there. Can you make out the tiny droplets in the edges of the margins or in the tips? In many plant leaves you can find at the tip there is a water droplet. So this is not dew, this is the process of guttation, which is exudation or the coming out or the oozing out of water, not in the form of vapor but liquid water itself is coming out of the plant. Why? Because the root pressure is very high and transpiration is rather low. in certain conditions, like we spoke, like in humid, when the humidity is very high, or in moisture laden air, transpiration rate will come down, but the plant is continuously taking up, absorbing water, because water is surplus in the soil. So what will happen? The development of root pressure will take place, right? Lot of water pressure is there, higher water potential. So water is forced out in the form of drops from the margins or the tips of the leaves, which is a phenomenon called guttation or exudation, right? So in this diagram you can see guttation for yourself. Now how does guttation take place? Like in transpiration, stomata is the organ. In guttation, hydrothodes are those paths through which water goes out. What are hydrothodes? In the epidermis of the leaves, there are openings or pores in which the epidermis is not fully differentiated. So this pore will be known as hydrothode, and a hydrothode will always be accompanied by a large intercellular spaces, okay, alright, and water cavities on which the waters will be stored, and they will go out in the night time or in the early morning. So the hydrothode are those specialized pores because of undifferentiated epidermis, or not fully differentiated epidermis. This can come up as a question. What are hydrothodes? You cannot just write specialized pores. You have to also write not fully differentiated epidermis, and through the pores through which guttation takes place. And where, what is the location? That up in the epidermis you can find the pore, and just below that pore there is a large water cavity. In this picture I am showing you the hydrothode structure. So this is a hydrothode, this is the pore, and just flanked by the pore there is this large water cavity. You know, they have written this water cavity is there, in which the excess water that is being carried by the xylem vessels, by the tracheids, they are reaching this water cavity because of excess root pressure, okay. And also this water cavity is flanked by some very loosely held cells. These loosely held cells are known as epithem. This is the anatomy of the hydrothode or the plant bearing the hydrothode. Epithem are very thin walled, loosely held parenchymatous cells. Thin walled parenchyma and very loosely held. And also mostly non-chlorophyllous. They do not have the chlorophyll, mostly non-chlorophyllous, which are flanking this blindly ending tracheids or xylem vessels, and the water droplets then diffuse through, or by cell to cell osmosis, they move into the water cavity to be thrown outside through the hydrothode. Guttation is seen in the morning or in the night, and guttation occurs in herbaceous plants like potato, tomato. In the grasses you can observe colocasia. In these kinds of plants you can actually see this process. And bleeding is another type of exudation of watery solution from the sap. Like I said, that you take up a herbaceous plant in the morning in moisture laden atmosphere and you cut the stem, you can see that the water will come out. Or sometimes in woody plants the raisins come out. If you cut the wood, you can see the plant raisins coming out. So that process is known as bleeding. And bleeding will of course happen from the injured parts of the plant. Once only you cut the stem, you will be able to observe bleeding. Like guttation or transpiration, the water is going out automatically, but in bleeding it does not happen, just like human bleeding also. So this is the structure of hydrothode. What is written? Guttation or exudation of water from hydrothodes of leaf margins is caused by root pressure. So, if high is the root pressure and low is the transpiration, guttation will occur. It is often mistaken for dew in the morning because it occurs at night when water is not processed as quickly within the plant. So, that the water which is being used by the plant, it is not getting used up in photosynthesis. Excess water is there in the plant. Okay, next we talk about the difference between transpiration and guttation. This is a very important question. This often come up. One is transpiration is a daytime process because stomata are open during the day, whereas guttation is a night and early hours of the morning. Water is lost in the vapor form, and guttation, water is lost in the liquid, like liquid droplets. Pure water is lost in transpiration, but in guttation the water has organic and inorganic substances dissolved in it. Transpiration can happen through stomata, cuticle and through lenticels, but here water is lost through hydrothodes. It reduces the temperature of the transpiring surface. So, as the water vapor goes out, the surface gets cooled, the leaf surface gets cooled, but guttation, no lowering of temperature happens, right? Only the water droplets come out. This cools the plant body, it has no cooling effect, and excess transpiration causes wilting of leaves, but excess does not cause any loss of turgidity in the leaves. Only the excess water is going out. Otherwise, no wilting, no such phenomenon take place in guttation. So, these are the differences which are quite easy to understand. Now, we come to the question answer part, which is the most vital part of any class. Like whatever you have learned, you will apply that knowledge to solve these questions. Given one word, so some of the questions are from the previous class also. You have to give one word for the following. The loss of water from the injured parts of a plant, what is it? We have just now studied it. Take a few seconds time. It is called bleeding. An apparatus to compare the rate of transpiration in cut shoot. This is known as, this apparatus we have learnt about in our previous class is known as Ganong's spotometer, isn't it? Recall what was Ganong's spotometer, and if you don't know, if you do not know, there is nothing to worry about. Go back to our previous presentation from the page of Learned Education and learn this Ganong's spotometer from there. Respiratory openings found on the stem of woody plants. This is also we have learned just now. This is known as lenticels, right? Loss of water in the form of droplets from the margins of leaves. This is guttation. And a plant with sunken stomata. If you have to give an example, you can say nerium. This is a scientific name, so you have to underline this name, the genus name. So, these are the answers of one word questions. Okay, here they have asked you to rewrite the correct form of the statement by inserting suitable word or words at the right place. So, it is a form of a fill in the blanks which they have given. They have missed out the word. You have to guess where the word can be inserted. You cannot delete any word given in the statement. You have to underline the inserted words. So, this kind of elaborate instruction questions can also come. Read through the instructions very carefully, otherwise you will end up making a mistake. Right, first one is transpiration is the loss of water from the leaves of a plant. So, what is missing? Try to guess where should we put the blank. It is not as easy as the fill in the blank question. Transpiration is the loss of water from leaves. Aerial parts of the plant they have mentioned. Loss of water they have mentioned, but they haven't mentioned in the form of vapor. In the form of vapor. I am having to stand in the middle of the board because I have to write it precisely there. There is no space to rewrite the entire sentence. In the form of vapor, water is getting transpired. Gallon's photometer is used to show transpiration in plants. This is quite right. What is missing then? There is one word which is missing. You have to guess and place the word in the right part of the statement. So, Gallon's photometer is used to show, I am telling you the answer, I hope you have guessed, the rate of transpiration. Not just transpiration, rate. More transpiration occurs from dorsiventral leaf. What have they not, what part they have missed? They have missed that more transpiration occurs from the lower surface. Very good. If you have, for those who have already said, it happens through the lower surface of the leaves. As I am writing, you guess the next answer. Bleeding is the exudation of water or sap from parts of a plant. Had it been a fill in the blanks question, the blank would have been here. From this, which part? From injured parts. If you do not injure the stem, if you do not cut the stem, bleeding would not happen. Guttation is the loss of water along the margins of the leaves. Now, guttation is the loss of water in the form of droplets from the, in the form of droplets from the margins of the leaves. So, this is the solved paper. You go through this again, check yourself, assess yourself whether you can understand and write it yourself or not. Short answer type questions. So, reason based questions, I have discussed a lot number of diagrammatic and these kinds of questions in my previous class, in the previous video. You can go through that. In this video, we have these questions in front of us. Give reasons for the following. Presence of sunken stomata in nadium. You have just now studied. It is to reduce the rate of transpiration. Okay. And leaves of certain plants roll up in a bright sunny day. This also is for the same thing. This is also an adaptation, structural modification, so that the plant transpires little, the rate reduces. You have to briefly explain, I told you, remember, that how the rate of transpiration is affected by these factors. One is a windy day. If the day is windy, that means high velocity winds are blowing. That will take away the water vapor and clear up the surface of the stomata or the leaf surface, so that stomata can transpire more. So, you can say rate of transpiration, again I am writing a T, will be higher. On a foggy day, you can, what can you see? The water vapor is laden with moisture. So, in those days transpiration rate will go down. Why it will go down? Because there should be a difference in the water potential outside of the leaf and inside of the leaf, for which the water will go out. If the outside air has a lot of moisture, then why will more water will go out? So, transpiration rate will go down. Intensity of light, if the intensity of light is there, the temperature will rise up and transpiration will again rise up. And humidity lastly of atmosphere, if the atmosphere is laden with water vapor moisture, then transpiration will go down. In humid conditions, transpiration will be less. So, these kinds of question they will pick up from the topics like factors, they can pick up from the topic like what are the adaptations, so they can ask you questions. This is the one diagrammatic question we have over here. You have to name the structure shown in the section. So, this is basically a section of the apex of the leaf showing hydathode. Okay. So, the structure is apex of leaf, section of apex of the leaf showing hydathode. I know I have shown you some other picture of a hydathode where the hydathode was much clear. That is a picture of your book, and this picture also comes in the exams. So, you need to be acquainted with both kinds of pictures. It is also a section of the apex of the leaf showing the hydathode. Now they have asked us to label the parts from 1 to 5. So in part 1 you can see that this is the water cavity which I was talking about. I am writing H2O cavity, okay, so that there is more space. Water cavity where the water is getting accumulated and is going out. Number 2 is, if you see very closely in the diagram, you can see that this is the epidermal cell. They have not exactly in this particular picture, they have not shown that pore which is the hydrothode. These are the cells, the loosely held parenchymatous cells which were there just flanking the water cavity. So 3 will be the epithem, E-P-I-T-H-E-M. 4 will be what? 4 will be the vascular bundles, xylem tracheids, okay. These are carrying the water. The root pressure is quite high. So what is happening? This water is just going out into the water cavity. And number 5 is the, what is number 5? This is the parenchymatous cells. You can say these are the mesophyll cells which are just below the epidermis. Mesophyll cells. Mesophyll cells are the ones who are they are responsible for photosynthesis. Because they have chlorophyll, they can fix solar energy and carbon dioxide. They can fix carbon dioxide. So these are the labelings that they have asked us to provide. So this diagram was only to show you that 2 hydrothode diagrams can come up. Had they shown that particular pore, we would have marked that as hydrothode. Okay. So a quick revision will, we will do a quick revision, which is like from the first part, we spoke about transpiration, we spoke about the importance of transpiration, how transpiration is cooling the plant, how it is helping in ascent of sap, etc. We spoke about the disadvantages. We spoke about the factors which are responsible for transpiration to take place, which are influencing the rate. In each of these, I have shown you whether it is going up or down, transpiration rate. We spoke about cuticular and lenticular transpiration. If you see in the diagram, you can see how the cuticle is a waxy covering which is impervious to water. But if the cuticle is thick, it will reduce transpiration rate. But in normal cases, the water does go out in the form of vapor through the cuticle also. These are lenticels, these are openings on the stems of plants. We showed you that how great rates of transpiration will lead to the wilting of leaves. Right? For that we need the antitransparents like phenyl mercuric acid or abscisic acid, which we can spray on the plants, which will close the stomata to reduce transpiration. Then there are adaptations, which amongst the adaptation, the sunken stomata, presence of hair, narrow leaves, very important for you to remember. These are the modifications to reduce the rate of transpiration. Lastly, we spoke about guttation and bleeding, the two phenomenon where water is going out of the plant because of excess development of root pressure and less of transpiration. We spoke about the differences between the two phenomena, and then we came to the questions. So with this chapter is completed. You can practice questions on your own and see if you have any difficulties. Thank you. Do not forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel of Learned Education so that every time I upload a video, you can get notified. Thank you.